The Committee on Foreign Affairs will come to order. The purpose of this hearing is to examine the administration's disastrous emergency evacuation from Afghanistan. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. In the spring of 2021, against the advice of his top generals in the intelligence community, President Biden announced he would unconditionally withdraw all American troops from Afghanistan, a decision that I opposed. I and many on this committee received multiple briefings from the State Department, the Department of Defense, the intelligence community, and the difference in their assessments was stark. Both DOD's and the IC's outlook were very grim in their assessment, while the State Department, mimicking the White House, consistently painted a rosy picture, ignoring the realities on the ground. The president promised, quote, "There's going to be no circumstances where you see people being lifted off the roof of an embassy like in Vietnam." Yet they were. Multiple people in the Biden administration said they had planned for every contingency. They did not. Instead, they spent the next 4 months ignoring the realities. As a result, when the Taliban rapidly captured territory during the summer of 2021 and entered Kabul on August 15th, we simply weren't ready. Because of the Biden administration's dereliction of duty, the world watched heartbreaking scenes unfold in and around the Kabul airport for the next 2 weeks. A sea of humanity desperately trying to make it through airport gates that represented freedom. We all saw the images of desperate Afghans clinging to planes as they took off, with some plummeting from the sky to their deaths. Mothers handing their children to strangers over the airport walls, willingly giving them up in the hopes of saving their lives. And then horror struck on August 26th. A suicide bomber at Abbey Gate killed 13 American service members, injuring at least 45 more and killing approximately 170 Afghans. That day was the deadliest day for American troops in Afghanistan in 10 years. We are joined here today by Marine Sergeant Tyler Vargas Andrews and former Army Specialist Aiden Gunderson. Both were deployed to Afghanistan during the evacuation. They can give a firsthand account of what it was like inside Kabul airport during those harrowing 2 weeks. Sergeant Vargas Andrews, a sniper at Abbey Gate, was gravely injured in the terrorist attack that occurred. He has undergone 44 surgeries and has lost both his leg and his arm, as well as his kidney. Thank you, sir, for the courage to be here today. Former Specialist Gunderson, a medic with the 82nd Airborne, was one of the first people on the scene helping anyone that he could. Gentlemen, this nation owes you a debt of gratitude, not just for your service to our country, but also for the work both of you did to help numerous people to safety during the evacuation, saving so many lives. You should be proud of all that you've done. And I would like to thank you for your service. I'd also like to ask the many Afghanistan veterans here today to please stand and be recognized. On behalf of a grateful nation, we thank you. In the midst of the unfolding chaos in Kabul in August of 2021, The United States State Department was all but useless. Like myself, many of my colleagues, including people on both sides of the aisle in this room today, were forced to become mini State Departments. We worked any avenue we could to rescue Americans, green card holders, and our Afghan allies that we promised we would protect. No one left behind was a credo. We violated that promise. Thankfully, though, in the void left by an absent State Department, many Americans stepped up to fill the vacuum, primarily organized by veterans, groups like Allied Airlift 21, Team America, and Task Force Pineapple, just to name a few that saved thousands of lives. And that is why I'm honored to have France Hong, Peter Lucier, and Scott Mann here with us today as well. All three of these men worked tirelessly to rescue many people as many as they could during this evacuation. It was often referred to like Schindler's List. If you're on the list, you made it out alive. If you weren't, you didn't. What happened in Afghanistan was a systemic breakdown of the federal government at every level, and a stunning failure of leadership by the Biden administration. Because even though President Biden said, and I quote, "If there's American citizens left, we're going to stay to get them all out," end of quote, we now know that he left more than 1,000 American citizens in Afghanistan. In addition to the almost 200,000 Afghan partners and allies that we promised we would save. We promised them we would help them, only to abandon them to the Taliban, not to mention the women who were left behind to the mercy of the Taliban under Sharia law. This was an abdication of the most basic duties of the United States government, to protect Americans and leave no one behind. I want every Gold and Blue Star family member and every veteran out there watching this today to know that I will not rest, and this committee will not rest, until we determine how this happened and hold those responsible for it accountable. And before I close, I would like to honor the 13 service members who died at Abbey Gate, that tragic day. Staff Sergeant Darren Hoover, Sergeant Yohani Rosario, Sergeant Nicole Gee, Corporal Hunter Lopez, Corporal Dagan W. Page, Corporal Humberto Sanchez, Lance Corporal David Espinoza, Lance Corporal Jared Schmitz, Lance Corporal Riley McCollum, Lance Corporal Dylan Marola, Lance Corporal Kareem Nikoy, Petty Officer 3rd Class Maxton Soviak, and Staff Sergeant Ryan Noss. Can we please have a moment of silence to honor the memory of these fallen heroes and all of the fallen heroes in the Afghan conflict? May God bless them, and God bless their family, and God bless the United States of America. And with that, I turn to our ranking member for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And let me begin my remarks by thanking all of the witnesses for appearing before the committee today, and to thank those who served and our armed services for your service to our great country. I want to particularly recognize Specialist Gunderson and Sergeant Tyler Vargas Andrews, two of the witnesses on the panel today who were deployed to Hamid Karazi International Airport to assist with the non-combatant evacuation operation during August 2021. Gentlemen, I can only imagine the pressure that so many of you faced during the evacuation operation, which allowed for us to facilitate the evacuation of over 100,000 people. Specialist Gunderson, in your written statement, you write, "No amount of mental preparation or military training could have prepared me for Abiegate." I was struck by that statement and the description in your testimony. What an incredible weight and responsibility. I could only imagine what's that like. It brings up for me the emotion that I have felt when I hear from veterans of the war in Afghanistan describe their experiences, both in Afghanistan and upon their return home. Many of whom I've met that comes from my district, where I was told the repeated deployments and the separation from their families, watching fellow soldiers suffer from injury or the trauma of seeing them die. The difficulty of returning home and reintegrating back into their home life, tough. The heartbreak of our Gold Star families having to face empty seats during the holidays. So I honor all of your service, and it underscores to me that the President of the United States made the right decision to bring all our troops home, because I can't in good conscience imagine sending more American men and women to fight in Afghanistan. We are here today to examine the emergency evacuation from Afghanistan in August 2021 and the administration's broader relocation efforts. It is often said it is easier to start a war than to end it. The war in Afghanistan is no different. This war that began as an effort to decimate al-Qaeda ballooned into a nation-building exercise that lasted across 4 administrations and saw more than 800,000 U.S. service members deployed. And yes, the tragic deaths of over 2,461 Americans, including the 13 killed during the evacuation operation. And while the U.S. government planned for a wide range of contingencies, the worst possible scenario happened. Despite repeated assurances, some right here in the capital of the United States, of Afghan President Ghani, he fled the country. And the Afghan government and security forces collapsed faster than expected, and before the withdrawal of our military had been completed. Despite the harsh realities of on the ground, a lingering ISIS threat, and heightened uncertainty as the Taliban took control, our diplomats, military, and intelligence professionals facilitated an unprecedented and heroic evacuation never seen before. We worked with more than 24 countries to evacuate American citizens and lawful permanent residents to relocate Afghans who had helped us, citizens of our allies and partners, and at-risk Afghans to the United States or transit locations across the globe. In the end, more than 120,000 people were evacuated to safety under some of the most difficult conditions imaginable. It was in a complex and dangerous environment, thousands of miles away. And so I commend our brave U.S. military and civilian personnel working closely with so many civil society organizations and everyday Americans for achieving this. But while the historic Afghanistan airlift brought many people to safety, we must acknowledge that there were mistakes along the way. And as a result, many Afghans who supported the American war effort over the past 20 years continue to seek pathways to immigrate to the United States. As in most things, context matters. The evacuation did not happen in a vacuum. A culmination of policy decisions informed and influenced the events of August 2021 and continue to shape how we navigate ongoing relocation and diplomatic efforts today. In the years preceding the 2021 withdrawal, the decision to engage in the direct negotiations with the Taliban at the exclusion of the Afghan government and the invitation to meet at Camp David conferred international legitimacy to the Taliban. The deal that derived from these negotiations required the withdrawal of our forces without forcing the Taliban to fulfill any real commitments or separating from al-Qaeda, on agreeing to a ceasefire or on negotiating with the Afghan government. I called in the last Congress the precipitous U.S. troop drawdowns were ordered throughout 2020 without regard to the Taliban's compliance with the deal. This same deal forced the Afghan government to release 5,000 Taliban fighters, severely altering the power and structure of the country. Meanwhile, U.S. immigration mechanisms available to our Afghan allies face long-standing challenges. The SIV program for Iraq and Afghanistan, established in 2006, statutorily capped participants at 50 per year. In 2027 and 2008, it capped this number at 500. Though the caps on SIVs grew over the years, they did not comport with the numbers of Afghans who would have qualified. Separate from the legislative limitations placed on the SIV programs, executive branch agencies processing and vetting SIV applications were also time-consuming and resource-challenged. On top of that, the previous administration actively undermined U.S. immigration refugee admissions and mechanisms and specifically paused the processing of special immigrant visas applications entirely in 2020, creating a backlog more than 17,000 applications. In fact, at the start of the current administration, there had not been a single interview of an SIV applicant going back to March of 2020. In total, these policy decisions not only altered the balance of power and reduced U.S. leverage in Afghanistan, but created incredibly difficult circumstances as we work to bring allies to safety and the U.S. war in Afghanistan to a close. So despite these challenges, the Biden administration took decisive steps to honor its promises to the Afghans that have stood with us by restarting the SIV interview process, speeding up the SIV processing, and surging additional consular officers, adjudicators, and other personnel to restart the program. The administration also worked to repair the institutional damage done to the U.S. refugee admissions program and establish priority referral categories for Afghans within. So, as I conclude, we must acknowledge this important effort to relocate vulnerable Afghans, and it is ongoing, and that this administration is actively working to help those still in Afghanistan safely leave the country. But the evacuation and relocation process are not without faults, many of which will require decisive action and legislation from the U.S. Congress, not only our executive branch agencies or the White House. We are here to understand the full context around Afghan evacuations and ongoing relocations so that we can streamline the process and make necessary improvements to fulfill our promises to our Afghan allies going forward. We must further enhance cooperation and communication with the wide array of civil society stakeholders and everyday Americans, like our witnesses who are here today, who have dedicated significant time and resources to this effort. So I fully support, Mr. Chairman, bipartisan oversight as we focus on solutions to safely relocate those deserving Afghans and address the broader challenges to our SIV and refugee assistance programs. Our country has paid a great cost during the war in Afghanistan. Our aim then should not be simply to score political points here today, but to rather focus on real solutions that will help real people. That is the best way to honor the sacrifices of so many Americans who served in or supported our interests in Afghanistan over the last 20 years, especially and including our witnesses here today. So I look forward to their testimony, and I yield back my time.